button, so let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the internet before we go ahead and get started. We've got some serious business to attend to today. Let's get nice and centered here in the frame so I can not be cockeyed the entire broadcast, which is just a fun word to say, isn't it? So it looks like the stream is working, and that's tremendous news. Let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my friends, we are talking about the word condemned, because that is exactly what the United States Congress has done to China. They said, listen, China, we're very unhappy with this so-called weather balloon you sent over here. And as a result of your spying on us, you are hereby condemned. And we'll see what that means. We've got a lot of Congress to go through today. And today was very busy with Congress. All right. There was so much going on today, I couldn't even take it. We reviewed a bunch of this stuff this morning on our member-only stream, but there was also an oversight committee hearing. There was multiple Senate hearings. And so today we're going to be focused on the balloon stuff. But tomorrow, we're probably going to go back over to the judiciary and the Justice Department, FBI, free speech, Twitter files, all that stuff. So if you're looking for that today, we're going to save that for tomorrow. Fridays are usually slower anyways. So that is what's happening. Now, today, it's balloon and China stuff. We've got a lot to get to. Actually, a very interesting day. So the House condemns China. That was something that happened early this morning, and it was actually unanimous. All right. You don't see this happen in this country too much anymore. Absolutely unanimous, condemning China. I've got two clips from the House of Representatives, one from Young Kim. She's a Republican from California, which is interesting. And then we also have another one from Sheila Jackson Lee, who's also a lot of fun to listen to. And she's a Democrat from Texas. So we have like a little bizarro world thing going on here. We also are going to actually look at the House resolution. Okay, so this is passed into law. The House said you are hereby condemned, China. And the China, I'll tell you this right now, they don't like to be condemned. All right. So I know this is all about a balloon, right? We're all sort of, kind of serious, kind of funny, but kind of more serious than funny. We don't really know yet. They've been condemned, all right? And China doesn't like to be condemned. We're going to learn more about that. So after we go through the House, we'll turn our attention back over to the Senate. In the Senate, we're going to focus on all of the border states, but not the southern border states that nobody cares about. We'll focus on the northern border states, which gets a little bit more attention. And they are very angry. So we're going to check in with Montana. We've got Senator Tester. We have opening statements. There was an Appropriations Committee hearing today talking about money, right? They're all freaked out about this balloon flying over their states. They're saying, is this going to happen again? Do you have any money in the budget? Are you going to be able to stop this from reoccurring? And so all of the border states were just very unhappy. We've got Alaska. We've got Murkowski chiming in on this. Tester is from Montana. You see this. He said the balloons scare the hell out of me. What are you guys going to do about this, man? We don't want balloons in Montana. We also have Murkowski from Alaska. We got Maine with Susan Collins. And we have Senator Hoven, not this guy, that's the person speaking, who's from North Dakota. And they're all just saying, what did you guys do? Why did you guys wait so long? And they're saying, Alaska is a part of the United States Joe Biden administration. So we'll go through all of that. Then we'll turn our attention over to another committee, which is the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We'll hear Marco Rubio sort of ramble off into oblivion as he likes to do, but it was an interesting answer from the Biden people. I actually thought it was a pretty decent answer, to be honest. So we'll go through that one. And then we have Rand Paul, who, of course, turns this into a COVID origin story, which I just love. So he goes off and he blasts the State Department. He's like, do you guys know anything? She says, no, we really don't know anything. He's like, yeah, I know. You don't know anything. And so it's a very fun exchange between our friend Rand. And our final segment will confirm that China is, in fact, ignoring the Biden administration now. They're very upset that their very friendly civilian weather balloon got obliterated from the sky. And so now they are ignoring his phone calls. They are not responding to Joe Biden's phone calls, evidently, over in China over there. And they're also very upset with what he said at the State of the Union. And so the State of the Union speech was an opportunity for the president to address some of this stuff. And he went out and actually kind of lectured Xi Jinping. And he said, who would ever want to be that guy? And so the Chinese are unhappy with that. So they're ignoring his phone calls. We've got the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who's out there explaining some of this. He sat down with CBS, and we'll see what one of Joe Biden's allies, not in the White House, but in the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, what he had to say about it as well. So we're going to learn a lot more actually about the balloon, because we have two opening statements from people from the government, from the Secretary of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, this woman here, Melissa Dalton, and this fella, Douglas Sims II. He's a director of operations of something, and he's got a bunch of badges and pins and all that crap. So we'll go through all that here on the show today. And as you can see, we've got a lot to get to. And my friends, if you want to be a part of the show, the best place to do that is by going over to our community at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have a lot of amazing people over there chatting away. I see Jay Cutbirth, Tsunami Tommy's over there, Aggie Martin, John McGarvey, Dan at 36G's in the house, Facts Matter, and Paul Mino. And so it's a great place for you to join. We have morning member-only streams, headlines. We do some other fun stuff. And there's a lot more to come. I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm very excited to share with you very soon about some big changes ahead. So we'll talk all about that. But we also want to thank our sponsors over at Brickhouse Nutrition, where you can get your Field of Greens, your real organic superfood. So you can eat healthy. Get your fruit and vegetables, man. Got to be healthy and feel ultra vibrant. So go to fieldofgreens.com. Use code Robert to save 15% off on your first purchase. We also have our law firm, the R&R Law Group, located in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's going to be a very busy weekend here. We've got the Super Bowl. We got the Waste Management Open. We got all sorts of other stuff happening. So keep this number handy. It's better to know us and not need us than to need us and not know us. 480-787-0394. All right, my friends. So let's get into the business on the day, because there is a lot to attend to. Congress was quite busy. The House of Representatives condemns China for their very peaceful civilian weather balloon. It was not even close. Unanimous vote, 419-0. Not often we see that in this country. Let's watch it count down and the votes finally be tallied. You'll see at the top it says condemning Chinese spy balloon. 2/3 of the majority are needed for that. They got that no problem. We had 15 people not voting, 419 voting yeah. When we were watching this morning, we saw actually there was one nay that popped up. It was very funny. And then the nay conveniently floated back into the yay section. And we don't know if that was just a little clerical error there, or if somebody, actually voted nay before voting yay. We'll see. This is what it looked like as the votes came in.
Go. Gavel or no? On this vote, the yeas are 419, the nays are 0. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
China, you are condemned. Whack, right? That's what you get. Don't send your garbage spy balloon trash into our airspace. So the House is unhappy about it, not even close. I want to play some of the arguments before we actually read the resolution so we can see what they are talking about, because this is not this is not where it ends. Right? This is kind of the opening salvo on this whole saga. And we see that this representative from California, her name is Young Kim. She came out and she was explaining that, yeah, China was a big threat. They absolutely should be condemned. And she's also turning her attention over to TikTok, right? One spy balloon flying over the United States caused a lot of eyeballs to pay attention to this big issue, but it's not the end of the story. They've also got 100 million eyeballs through cell phone applications called TikTok.
On the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I rise in strong support of this resolution condemning the Chinese Communist Party's use of high-altitude surveillance balloon over U.S. territory as a brazen violation of U.S. sovereignty and international norms. The balloon has been shot down, and I thank those who bravely completed the mission. However, many questions remain, and intelligence reports show what we all knew. This was neither a coincidence nor something to be taken lightly. This surveillance balloon was part of a larger program by the CCP that has collected information on military assets in Indo-Pacific countries like Taiwan, Japan, India, and the Philippines.
One part of
We
much
all
bigger
know
operation.
that this balloon does not even scratch the surface of the CCP's surveillance capabilities. Millions of Americans are spied upon every single day through TikTok and other state-affiliated applications
Right.
and technologies. Whether in airspace or cyberspace, we cannot allow the CCP to spy on us. We cannot allow the CCP to threaten our way of life and the American dream. The time to project strength is now. We must defend our airspace, send a strong signal to the CCP that this behavior will not be tolerated, and equip our allies with the tools they need to deter and defend against CCP's aggression. As Indo-Pacific Subcommittee Chair, I'm committed to getting answers from the Biden administration about when they knew the CCP's balloon was entering the U.S. airspace, what they know about the CCP balloon program, and we need to ensure the United States responds to this type of aggression with strong, decisive action from our leaders. Thank you, and I yield back.
Representative Young Kim, she's a Republican out of California. There are evidently some still out there, which is pretty amazing. But unequivocal on that one, says that this was a serious threat. TikTok is a serious threat. This is just the beginning. There's a lot more to focus on, but she is happy that the balloon is no longer there and that it has been taken out. We'll see what comes next. We also have a short clip from Sheila Jackson Lee. Now, she's a Democrat out of Texas. So we had a Republican out of California. We also have a Democrat out of Texas. And we've heard a lot from Miss Jackson Lee. She usually has some very spicy takes. But here, interestingly, she was in alignment. She agrees basically with all the Republicans. This was unanimous. There are no dissenters on this.
I thank the ranking member, thank the managers of this bill. This was no weather balloon.
That's right.
This was a spy balloon. And let me be very clear. Members of both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, are standing before the American people and recognizing that this resolution of the Chinese Communist Party's actions are appropriate, and we should, as Americans, denounce their actions.
We should.
But let me be very clear as well. I want to congratulate United States military, intelligence officials, and others who effectively took the commander-in-chief's order that occurred on February 1st to shoot it down, and they handled themselves with the greatest amount of appropriateness to ensure that the American people were safe, to contain the threat, and to do their job. It serves no purpose to suggest that the commander-in-chief, President Joe Biden, failed the American people or did anything wrong.
What? Yes, it does. Doesn't it serve the purpose of making sure that if he did something wrong, he doesn't do it again? Like, for example, one criticism would have been, maybe he shouldn't have let it float through the entire continental U.S. Maybe it should have been taken out the moment it crossed into international airspace up in Alaska before it entered our airspace, including Alaska. So we do actually hold people accountable for their decisions and their actions. That's part of governance, isn't it? Now, she doesn't want you to do that because it hurts her side, but doesn't mean it's not a good reason.
Interestingly enough, in the midst of the spy balloon, over 70% of the American people believe that Joe Biden took to the podium in the State of the Union and gave them enough comfort that the State of the Union is well. Our souls are strong, and the American people are strong.
I saw those polls. I saw there was some poll from some organization that said 70% of Republicans were really thrilled with his speech. I just started laughing. Ridiculous.
So yes, as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I am keenly aware and concerned about this nation's national security. Keenly aware of the time frame in which this spy balloon came into our eyesight. With that in mind, even as it traversed the United States, I can assure you, in spite of the chronicling of the facts here, that General Austin, Department of Defense, and others that were responsible for our safety pursuant to the direction of the Commander-in-Chief followed this spy balloon and were able to handle its appropriateness in the course of shooting it down.
We're going to see about that because we have several different guests coming up here later who were interviewed by the Appropriations Committee, by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and others who all give us more details about this. And I think you're going to find that a lot of the other Congress people don't think it was handled so appropriately, don't like that it was allowed to float up there for so long, including the people in many of those border states called Alaska, Montana, Maine, North Dakota, and elsewhere.
And finally, let me say, it is important that we use this as a condemnation of the Chinese Communist Party. Let us not use this to intimidate Chinese Americans or to be able to create atmospheres of hate. I denounce that.
Nobody's
and I denounce
saying that.
SB 147 in the state of Texas that wants to stop Chinese Americans from buying property. That is not the American way. What is the American way is to stand as Democrats and Republicans and others and members of Congress to take our full responsibility alongside of the executive to ensure your national security. We have done that.
Well, nobody is saying to go and hate Chinese people or anything like that. I don't know what that bill's about in Texas, but I don't know where that came up.
We have the facts. We know the traversing. And I can assure you that the Chinese Americans have not engaged themselves in this activity and should not be condemned. And the Chinese Communist Party is aware of the strength of the people of the United States and their defense. I yield back.
Yeah, nobody's saying that the Chinese Americans were flying the balloon. That never came up at all. And so a very great question came in from our friend Chris Wolney. The question, of course, which is exactly where we're going next, is about this. What fool would vote nay to condemn the spy balloon? It's a good question, Chris. We saw that earlier in the day, and I don't know if it was an accident, clerical error, just pressed the wrong button, got fat thumbs or something, but it got reversed back. And we were joking about this. Is this something that he actually did want to vote nay, but then he voted nay and goes, oh crap, nobody's voting with me, and then got shoved back into the majority? Good question. But the question you're also asking is about what does this do? What does this mean? Is it all just kabuki theater? Is it all just a big joke? Why is this even necessary? Is it just a bunch of Congress people who just want to make a vote, make a speech, make a statement so that they feel better about themselves? Well, let's find out. Let's go over to the House resolution itself, because, you might suspect that this could just be the opening salvo. You could say this is the condemnation. We're also going to be subpoenaing stuff. We're also going to ask if anybody else knew about this. Was anybody complicit in this? Did anybody, whatever, wherever the investigation may go, maybe it leads to criminal charges. Somebody gets prosecuted. Maybe we get something out of it, but we got to ask ourselves what the resolution allows in the first place. So here's what we've got. House resolution approved by Michael T. McCall, United States House of Representatives representative. The HR is the following: condemning the Chinese Communist Party's use of high-altitude surveillance balloons over the United Territory as a brazen violation of U.S. sovereignty. Here's the resolution. This is what it says. Paragraph 1. Condemning. Probably loudly and hard, right? Condemning the Chinese Communist Party, their use of high-altitude balloon as a brazen violation of sovereignty. Whereas they say on February 2nd, the DOD publicly announced it was tracking the balloon belonging to the PRC. They say we also acknowledge that the North American NORAD began tracking it back on January 28th. This is kind of an official finding of the U.S. government, right? Yeah, it's a condemnation, but this is an official finding. The Chinese people, the Chinese government, the CCP over there, they're reading all of this just like we are. They're watching all of these hearings. They're watching all of these Congress people get up and testify. They're saying, oh, all right, well, I wonder what's coming next. A declaration of something? We'll see. They say, whereas the Secretary of Defense has stated that the balloon was being used by the PRC in an attempt to surveil strategic sites in the continental U.S., they say, whereas the surveillance balloon traveled near sensitive U.S. national security facilities, including the Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. We're going to hear from Senator Tester soon. Whereas on February 4th, a U.S. aircraft shot down the balloon off the coast of South Carolina. Whereas the CCP, Communist Party, their intelligence collection directed against the U.S. poses a threat to the U.S. They say while the PRC has a long history of intelligence collections against the U.S., reports of its espionage have risen significantly in recent years. The CCP attempted to spread false claims about the nature and the purpose of the surveillance balloon. They falsely claimed that it was a weather balloon that simply veered off course due to force majeure. On February 3rd, the Secretary of State postponed his planned trip to the PRC and referred to the balloon incident as an irresponsible act and a clear violation of sovereignty that undermined the purpose of the trip. They say that the International Civil Aviation Convention, Article 1, also known as the Chicago Convention, states that every state has complete and exclusive sovereignty over airspace above its territory. Don't fly your balloons here. Although the PRC surveillance balloons have previously violated our airspace, they say this incident differs from those prior violations due to length of time the balloons spent over the U.S. territory. All right, so even every Democrat is now on record saying that, yeah, what happened with Trump, even if you say that those were balloon infractions with Trump, they weren't really balloon infractions like this one. All right, so that argument is sort of in the garbage. Whereas it is in the United States national security interest to deter foreign adversaries from engaging in intelligence collection, it is therefore resolved in the United States House of Representatives. This is the next question. So what? All right, China did all this. The United States did all this. This is all the facts. We see a lot of this like in lawsuits. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did this. Therefore, count 1, murder. Count 2, assault. Count 3, right? So now, all of that being established. 1, Congress now, this is a finding, almost like an indictment. Congress condemns the PRC's brazen violation of U.S. sovereignty, denounces the CCP's efforts to deceive the international community through false claims about its intelligence collection campaigns in violation of our sovereignty. Number 3, Congress determines that it should be the policy of the United States to promptly and decisively act to prevent foreign aerial surveillance and their platforms, including those connected to the CCP, from violating our sovereignty. All right, Congress is saying this is not going to happen again. 4, calls on the Biden administration to continue to keep Congress apprised with comprehensive briefings on this incident, including a complete account of all known infiltrations by the Chinese over the past several years, a complete account of past similar incidents of balloons around the world, timeline of events for the most recent infiltration leading to the eventual shoot down of the balloon, an assessment of what surveillance data the PRC was able to transmit while the balloon was here, what were they able to beam on home, a detailed account of what measures were taken to mitigate the intelligence collection threat. We're going to get into a lot of that in the Senate. They may have been able to stop all of the data. Can't really tell. They don't tell us, but we'll see. The cost of those measures and the impact on the regular operations of the affected installations, the different silos. They also want a description of what options were identified and made available to Joe. A detailed account of all diplomatic communications between the U.S. State Department and China. A detailed description of plans, capabilities, methods to deter and defeat any intelligence collection activities conducted by the PRC in the national airspace, and what Congress needs to know to detect and defeat those activities in the future. All right, so that's, there's some substance there. I would say that there is actually some substance there. They want to dig in, get more records, right? It's a real kind of hard demand. And, whether the White House, whether the military works with them or not, I think it's sort of relative to the opposition in Congress. So right now, there is no opposition in Congress to any of this. This was a unanimous vote, right? Everybody in Congress wants all of these things, presumably. So the Biden administration and everybody that we're going to hear from, they're all kind of playing ball on this. There's something weird going on. There's not a lot of fighting in these hearings. All the senators are pissed. All the House representatives are pissed. Everybody's unhappy. And it kind of doesn't happen like that in our government all that often. So that is exactly what we saw in the House resolution. The U.S. House of Representatives condemns China. And of course, we'll turn over to the Senate and continue to cover. Hope you follow as we do. So let's do that right now, as a matter of fact. The United States Senate blasts the administration officials responsible for the Chinese balloon flying over America. And we're not just going to focus on any senators today. We've got 4 of them that I really want to highlight here. Senator Tester from Montana, which is where the balloon was sighted early in its trajectory and its flight path. We've got Senator Murkowski from Alaska. She's very angry. She says, Alaska is kind of like the first state on the path, and you didn't do anything to protect our state. We've got Susan Collins, who's coming in from Maine. She's very upset about this, wondering about the plotted path that the balloon flew over. And we also have North Dakota, who says, why don't you guys just shoot this stuff down at the very beginning? So the Senate's unhappy. And I want to start with Senator Tester from Montana, because he was very fired up. He said that these balloons scare the absolute hell out of me. He says, you better have a plan for this next time, and I hope that you do. Here is Senator Tester from Montana.
Department. It was a really robust budget last cycle.
And again, this is from the Senate Appropriations Committee. So they talk about money, very powerful committee. If you need money, you go to them. And so this is the committee asking Biden officials about money. Do you have enough money? Do you have a budget for these balloons? Do you have any plan to stop this from happening again?
I don't remember hearing about anything that dealt with balloons in the budget. Do we have a plan on what we're going to do next time this happens?
Senator, thank you. As you know, in the National Defense Strategy from 2022, the PRC is the pacing challenge.
I know, but what about the balloons?
All right, let's actually skip that, because what I forgot to do is go through her opening statement, which would make a lot more sense if I started there. We'll come back to that one. The opening statement is this whole segment up here that we just glossed over. So I want to introduce this woman. Her name is Honorable Melissa Dalton. She's the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Hemispheric Affairs, right? So that's her title there. You can see what she is going to be testifying about the balloon. This is her opening statement. Let's listen.
Melissa Dalton, and by General Sims. Melissa Dalton, you may start.
Good morning, Chairman Tester, Vice Chair Collins, and subcommittee members. Thank you for convening this important roundtable this morning. I know that the recent events surrounding the PRC's high-altitude surveillance balloon have directly affected a number of your states. I wanted to provide you with a brief overview of events before turning over to my colleagues and answering any questions that you have. The balloon entered our U.S. Air Defense Identification Zone and then airspace over Alaska on Saturday, January 28th. It was over Alaska for a short period of time and then flew over Canada. We continue to track and assess the balloon, learning more about the PRC's capabilities and tradecraft.
Okay, that's that big excuse they've been using for a long time. We wanted to monitor it. They weren't spying on us. We were spying on them. In fact, they just delivered us a nice little spy package, and we're like, oh, perfect. We can just watch this thing float all overhead. They just got to lay back in their lazy boy recliners and like, oh, perfect. The Chinese are here. Great. Cancel our spying plans to China. They're here. So we'll just watch their balloon. I don't believe that. Okay. Now, I think that's probably a useful benefit, but is that the primary operation of national defense? National defense is to defend the nation. That's priority one, right? Being able to observe your enemies while they're penetrating you is not the primary goal.
On Tuesday, January 31st, the balloon entered U.S. continental airspace. We were able to protect against PRC intelligence collection, which was straightforward since we knew where the balloon was. The president was briefed that same day, and through National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, directed the U.S. military to refine and present options to shoot the balloon down.
Jake Sullivan, he always appears in these very complex situations, doesn't he?
The military recommended taking the balloon down over water. Waiting to do so had three benefits. First, it gave us additional time to observe the balloon, again, assessing the PRC's capabilities and tradecraft. Simultaneously, we protected against intelligence collection, which again was relatively straightforward since we knew where the balloon was.
So I don't know what that means. We were able to protect against intelligence collection since we knew where the balloon was. Does that mean that they can stop the transmission of data, right? It's Hoever vacuuming up all of what it's surveilling. So they were able to stop it because they could track it?
Second, this allowed us to refine options and decrease the risk of debris causing harm to civilians. Please bear in mind, The balloon itself was 200 feet tall.
Whoa.
With a jetliner-size payload.
Whoa, it was a
We
jet.
consulted with NASA, who analyzed and assessed the potential debris
200 feet tall and the size of a jet. Huge.
field that the balloon would create based on trajectory, weather, and the estimated payload. And third, waiting to shoot the balloon down over water improved our prospects at recovery, which are ongoing. Throughout Wednesday and Thursday, we continued to track the balloon, and then on Friday, February 3rd, President Biden was briefed on the execution of a plan to shoot down the balloon once over water. This plan included the air assets that we would use to take down the balloon, as well as the joint forces we would use to recover it. He approved the plan, and throughout that night, National Security staff and the Department of Defense, including Joint Staff personnel, worked to ensure this mission was successfully executed. Throughout the night, as the President had requested, National Security Advisor Sullivan provided him with regular updates. Saturday morning, February 4th, President Biden spoke with Secretary Austin multiple times about the mission, and it was completed, as you are aware, on Saturday afternoon when the balloon was shot down and crashed in the ocean roughly 6 miles off the coast of South Carolina in our territorial waters. Due to rough seas, debris collection began on February 5th. The USS Carter Hall is collecting debris in and around where the balloon came down. The USNS Pathfinder is using sonar to map the ocean floor and search for debris. The Coast Guard is ensuring that the area is kept safe for both the public and our military personnel.
Yeah, so it's still floating around there.
The PRC is DOD's pacing challenge, and the PRC's irresponsible actions were visible for the American people and all of the world to see. Ultimately, we were able to collect intelligence from the balloon, we are recovering its contents, and we sent a clear message to the PRC that activity such as this is unacceptable.
Yeah, they let it go through the whole country. Now, they're saying that the destruction of the balloon is the message to China. We're going to see that as a theme that comes out through the rest of this today. They're saying a lot of, well, we destroyed it. I mean, China knows we destroyed their balloon. And China, to be fair, they are very unhappy about this. We'll go to that in a bit. But this is the end of Melissa Dalton.
Pete Asdew Jed Royal is here today to answer any questions you have about U.S. communications with the PRC.
All right, so we'll turn it over to him. Now, this is Mr. Douglas Sims as well, LTG Director of Operations, and he gets asked some questions. I think he has a brief opening statement here as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I appreciate today's opportunity to update you on the U.S. military efforts related to the recent high-altitude balloon from the People's Republic of China. As Ms. Dalton noted, we acquired the balloon on January 28th. Following the radar acquisition of the balloon as it approached Alaska, and given the determination the balloon was not a threat to U.S. citizens or aviation traffic, and the lack of its ability to conduct significant intelligence collection at that time, the NORAD Northcom commander assessed and reported he would continue to observe and report the balloon's movements.
So they let it come in. That's what he just said. They saw it. They identified it. They knew what it was. They assessed its capability to surveil. And they just said, we're just going to monitor it at that moment. Yeah, no, we see it. Yeah, it's coming in. It's coming directly at us. We'll just monitor and observe.
He advised the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense, who ensured the appropriate senior leaders were aware of the ongoing situation.
Hey, guys, Chinese spy balloon is coming in. I'm just going to let it come in, all right, just so you're aware. Okay, sounds good. Let us know if anything changes.
As the balloon crossed through Canada and approached the United States border,
which means it flew through Alaska, the whole state of Alaska, pretty big state out there.
The assessment for potential intel risk to sensitive critical U.S. sites in the upper Midwest increased, and the president asked for kinetic courses of action. In determining potential options, the risk of Chinese intelligence collection was deemed to be low to moderate.
Okay, so there's a risk. That's not good.
While the risk to U.S. personnel on the ground was assessed at moderate to significant.
Yeah, because you don't want to blow an airliner out of the sky once it comes into Montana. It would have been a good idea to do that maybe in Alaska.
The various debris field models combined with potential weaponeering. As the assessment for risk to U.S. personnel outweighed the potential intelligence loss, the recommendation was made to shoot the balloon down over an area that minimized the risk to U.S. citizens. That location was in the U.S. territorial airspace and waters off the South Carolina coast. The recommendation was approved by the president and executed by the Northcom commander using an F-22 Raptor on February 4th. The decision to shoot down the balloon in waters off South Carolina is allowing for the recovery of the balloon and its materials and the opportunity to gain additional intelligence insights on Chinese balloon and surveillance activities.
There's also water. Oh, look at that. That's a nice pause, too. That's a Murkowski face. Good pause on that one, too. Shout out to C-SPAN guy. So that's fun. So Murkowski's saying, that's interesting. She's thinking to herself right here, that's very curious. You know, there's water. She's thinking about the geography of her state. She's thinking, this is curious. There's water all around our state. A lot of it, actually. Yeah, we have a whole set of islands up there, in fact, you know. Why couldn't they have shot it down out there?
It is important to note, at any point along the balloon's path, the U.S. military possessed the authorities and the ability to shoot down the balloon in defense of our citizens. I look forward to your questions and appreciate the chance to be here today. And I should add that Vice Admiral Joyner, the Joint Staff J8, is here to address any resourcing questions, and I'll do my best to cover operationally related items. Thank you.
Yeah, and this idea that the balloon is more easily retrieved in the ocean, I have, just my doubts about that. Now, we went through this analogy previously, but if you're on an airplane and you throw your phone out of the open door hatch, are you going to be able to retrieve it more easily if your phone lands on the ground or if your phone lands in the bottom of the ocean? I would prefer, if I had to make that decision, to go drop it over some flat ground. I don't know about you. But all right, so those are the people who are there. There's two other individuals who are also speaking, but we're focusing on these senators. They're all in the border states, and they're getting a lot of attention because their border was crossed by the Chinese. I'm sure our border's crossed down here in Arizona on the southern border by the Chinese all the time, but they're not in a balloon, so nobody really cares about that. Plus, there's a few other, 100,000 or million people also coming over, so who cares about it anyways? But this is Senator Tester from Montana, who has a lot of problems with a Chinese balloon popping up and having his constituents taking pictures of it and calling his office and freaking out about the communists invading our country.
Department, it was a really robust budget last cycle. I don't remember hearing about anything that dealt with balloons in the budget. Do we have a plan on what we're going to do next time this happens?
Senator, thank you. As you know, in the National Defense Strategy from 2022, the PRC is the pacing challenge.
I know, but what about the balloons? I got all the other stuff, and we deal with it.
Absolutely.
Is there money in the budget, or if you're not into that, if you're not in that pay grade?
Yep.
Do we have a plan for when this happens again, and what we're going to do, and when we're going to do it? I will tell you this, and I appreciate but the truth is, we think we know what they were going to collect. We don't know. That scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Senator, thank you. It is incredibly serious, and please know, as we are recovering the balloon and learning more about it, and also kludging that with what we learned last week, we are building our understanding of what capabilities they have, what we need to do going forward.
And what about, and I'm over time, and this is the last thing, so you can answer it, I hope. Do we have a plan for the next time it happens and how we're going to deal with it? Because quite frankly, I'll just tell you, I don't want a damn balloon going across the United States when we potentially could have taken it down over the Aleutian Islands, no offense to Alaska, or in some of the areas in Montana. And I understand public health. I understand doing damage. I understand that could have been a nightmare. But the truth is I got a problem with a Chinese balloon flying over my state, much less the rest of the country.
Senator, absolutely. We sent a very clear message to the PRC when we shot it down in our sovereign airspace, in our sovereign waters, that has established that deterrent line. Jed, if you maybe turn to you in terms of communications with the PRC.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. We continue to conduct outreach to the PRC. We conducted outreach during the course of the events last week and have attempted subsequently. Part of the plan is to encourage the Chinese administration to open their lines of communication.
You can tell the folks at 11:30 that in classified session, I want to know what our response is going to be for the next balloon that comes over.
Yeah, I want to know too.
The response.
Sure, thank you, sir.
Susan Collins.
Yeah, want to know what ultimately happens, right? The answer should be it's really kind of one of two things. It's either, well, we're going to let them do it again, or we're going to blow it out of the sky immediately. Is there another strategy? Now, of course, you don't want to, I guess, tell your enemies what you're going to do normally, unless it's an invading your country, right? Now, if they come out and they say, well, we don't want to, it is classified briefing and we don't want to tell the Chinese what we're doing. Do you really need to like have a strategy about defending your homeland? Doesn't everybody kind of know you just defend your homeland, airspace? There was a great comment that came in a super chat. See if I can grab it. But the point that was made was that if this had been any other type of vehicle that was a threat, it would have been blown out of the sky. We'll get to that at the end of the stream. Here, Newbie of Death is in the house. If it was a commercial airliner full of civilians not obeying radio diversion, they would have shot it down immediately wherever it was. And there's a lot of good argument to that. If this was a Chinese different type of vehicle that was also threatening, maybe they would have treated it differently, or maybe not. Maybe they just say, oh, it's not that really big of a threat. Or if we blow out that airplane over us, it might land on, what is the policy? He says it scares the hell out of him. He says, hopefully they've got a plan next time. It's either going to be take it down or let it go. Not really very useful. And so we've got Senator Murkowski, we've got Susan Collins, we've got North Dakota, and Susan Collins and Senator Murkowski in particular are angry. Murkowski is yelling at these people. How dare you ignore Alaska? We're part of America too. And so we'll go there in a minute. But first, let's remember that if our country gets invaded, we all need to be healthy and wealthy and wise. And one of the ways to be healthy is by going to fieldofgreens.com, where you can get your real organic superfood, because we would all like to lose some of those leftover pandemic pounds. How sick are you of those weight loss ads for weight loss pills and fad diets and all of that stuff? We've all been there. We've all done it. Doesn't work. But you know what does? Eating healthy, especially healthy servings of fruits and vegetables every day. You do that, and I would imagine the weight probably falls right off. But look, vegetables, not a fan. Fruit, who's got time to prepare all of that every day? Instead, we can talk about Field of Greens. Field of Greens is a science-backed formula that you're not going to find in any other product. This is about proper nutrition, which reboots your metabolism so you can burn calories faster and lose weight the healthier way. And Field of Greens is the only brand backed by a better health promise. Yes, you're going to look and feel healthier, but the greater proof is going to come at your next checkup when your doctor says, wow, you've lost weight. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. All right, let's get you started. Go over to fieldofgreens.com. You'll save 15% off your first order. At fieldofgreens.com, they have a lot more than just the organic superfood called Field of Greens. All sorts of stuff to help you sleep, collagen to make you feel whatever, all that stuff, good stuff does. It's amazing. Be healthy, be well. Go over to fieldofgreens.com and use code Robert. Don't forget to use code Robert. All right. And so now, Senator Murkowski from Alaska is very upset about the Chinese balloon entering America through her state. And she lets Biden administration officials know.
Chairman, and I appreciate that you and the vice chair have called this meeting so timely. As an Alaskan, I am so angry.
Whoa.
I want to use other words.
Whoa, like what?
But I'm not going to.
F and M and A and
The
F
fact
and
of the matter is,
T.
Alaska is the first line of defense for America, right? If you're going to have Russia coming at you, if you're going to have China coming at you, we know exactly how they come. They come up and they go over Alaska. Sometimes they go on the top, sometimes they go straight across, but Alaska is it. And thank goodness the Pentagon, the Department of Defense have recognized where we sit on the globe to take care of the rest of this country. And thank goodness that we have invested the resources to make sure that we have the eyes on the skies and every place else. More fifth generation fighters sitting there in the state of Alaska. We know that, we're proud of it.
Use them.
everything that we do to stay focused, whether it's Cobra Dane out in the Aleutians or whether it's Clear Air Force Base that has a long-range discrimination radar, or out in Greeley, where we have the ground-based missile defense, we're ready. We're ready, man.
But they didn't use them. They just said, well, I mean, you know, well, it's just a Chinese balloon. I mean, do you really want to scramble the jets for that? You know, Blinken's meeting with them in like 3 days. You know, this could cause a big international problem. So I guess we'll just let it float over. It's pretty high. How high is it? 65,000 feet? Oh, okay, so that's like higher than commercial airliners is what they're thinking? Perfect. So people probably aren't going to see that. So we'll just let it float over.
And to the point that Senator Collins makes, it's like this administration doesn't think that Alaska is any
Part of the United States. And of course, the video goes out right there.
to get to the United is any part. Senator Collins makes, it's like this administration doesn't think that Alaska is any part of the
United States.
of the rest of the country
Right.
here. To get to the United States, you've got to come through Alaska. So when we see it first, as we did, as we all knew, and as you have suggested, Mr. Royal, I think you suggested, we knew when we first got eyes on this, that this balloon was not a weather station. This was not collecting weather information. We knew that.
She's so mad.
And so think about it
She wants to say idiots.
from Alaska's perspective. You said, Ms. Dalton, that the clear message here, we sent a clear message to the PRC when we shot this down in our sovereign waters.
After the fact, yeah, on the other side of the
Seems to me
country.
the clear message to China is we got free range in Alaska.
Yeah.
Because
And the
they're not-
country.
they're going to let us cruise over that until it gets to more sensitive areas. Tell me where the sensitive areas are. Alaskans have stepped up willingly and support our military. But when we're talking about the sovereign waters and the sovereign territories of this country, Alaska is part of that.
I love this. I love the states lecturing the federal governments. Hey, you have taken away from us our ability to defend ourselves. You have said that you have exclusive jurisdiction over the borders and over national security and over the military. And you lecture us all the time about how it's all classified and we can't know this, that, and the other thing. And you can't even stop a stinking balloon from crossing into our country. And you just allow it to mosey on over Alaska like we don't exist. We've got 2 senators. We've got a bunch of people live there who are U.S. citizens. And they're just thinking of them like they're an afterthought.
So I know we're going to have an opportunity for more information in the classified brief. I've already received one, and it was pretty thorough. And I think that the American public deserve more than they have seen in terms of transparency about why this spy balloon was allowed to spend 2 days.
Yeah. Floating over Alaska.
To spend 2 days.
I don't know why this video is being difficult here.
Threat to our waters and over the state of Alaska, the state that is the guardian for everybody else. And you're saying that at that time, there was not a threat to Alaska citizens or assets that we have, and that the risk assessment rose later as it was coming into the rest of the lower 48 there. You know, at what point do we say a surveillance balloon, a spy balloon coming from China is a threat to our sovereignty. It should be the minute
It crosses.
it crosses
She's right.
the line, and that line is Alaska.
She's right. 100%.
The question that I have, and I apologize that it's taken me this long to get to the question,
It's
but
okay.
I'm really concerned
It's okay,
about
Lisa,
what
you're on
we
a roll.
have
Get it.
identified as these data gaps. We know that we have seen balloons previous that were also the surveillance balloons. We didn't realize until later because we weren't able to do the analysis until later. This committee is the Appropriations Committee. If we need to spend the money to make sure that we don't have gaps in our own data, that what we see is clearly understood, we need to know how to fund that. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm over my time. I don't think we'll get the answers that we need here in this subcommittee, unfortunately.
No.
We're going to have to get them in closed hearing, but I think people in this country deserve to know why the state that is the first line
was ignored, was forgotten, and was just left behind. So she is on a tear, and she's exactly right about that. I think that the U.S. government, right, they tell us they're in control. Don't worry about it. And they just dump on the states all the time. It doesn't matter what border it is. They don't care. Chinese coming across Alaska, Montana, Chinese coming across the southern border, drugs, fentanyl coming across the southern border. They don't care. But it's their exclusive jurisdiction. They're supposed to be in charge of it. They're supposed to protect the citizens within those countries, within those states, as the leader of the country. Instead, they put Americans literally at risk, right? They put American, now nothing happened, but for a big several days there was a real possibility that China had something they didn't know, or, mistakes are made. They don't know every single facet of what's in that thing. Probably why, if we're being honest, they blew it up over the water, and they didn't want it to land on the ground because they don't really know what is in there, right? You can't possibly know everything that's in there. You have to account for the unknown. And so they blew it up over the water to protect themselves. And, maybe that was the right call. But maybe they should have done it before it crossed international borders. Maybe Murkowski's dead right that they should have done it the minute it crossed the line, instead of just saying, well, we'll just let it mosey on across. Now we have another senator. This is a senator from North Dakota. His name is Senator Hoven. And he's saying, all right, guys, why did you just take this out? Like they said, just shoot it right down from the very beginning. It could have been easy. We would have avoided all of this nonsense. We have all of these hearings over a balloon that entered our airspace that could have been dealt with from day one.
Fair enough.
Senator from North Dakota, Senator Hoven.
Secretary Dalton, I just was listening to one of your responses and then spoke with Senator Murkowski. If you had the opportunity to shoot the Chinese spy balloon down either over the remote mountains of Alaska or over water near Alaska, why didn't you? Why is it okay to have the Chinese fly some type of aircraft over Alaskan airspace?
Sure. Let me walk water to land first. The first would be, in terms of the water, General Van Erck again assessed that it was there was no hostile act, hostile intent, or potential impact to critical intelligence capabilities. More so, he was continuing to characterize the system. And it's for us now, looking back, there was an assertion that we were absolutely certain that it was, in fact, conducting surveillance or intended to go in a certain space. And we'll talk more about that in the next session.
In the classified briefing section. So I think he's saying that they don't really know, they didn't know the intention of this balloon, where it was going. They didn't know the trajectory. And so they were treating it as much more of an unknown rather than as a known spying balloon.
But those were thoughtful actions. The other piece I would add, over the land of Alaska, sir, we spent a lot of time, as you know.
So didn't answer that question at all. Why don't you just shoot it down over the water? He says, well, he's kind of saying we didn't assess it to be a real threat or even worthy of shooting down at that time. Glosses over that, then answers the easier question, much easier to answer this question. Why don't you shoot it once it got over the land? Right, because the balloon is making a beeline for the land. So it's going to have a small period of time when it crosses the barrier where it's international waters. Now it's U.S. This is the line that Murkowski's talking about. Once it crosses that line, boom, now you shoot it down. But then once it, it's a buffer essentially between the international waters and the landfall. So once it crosses landfall, then it's much easier for him to explain why they didn't shoot it down, because there's people who are living on the land. That's not the question. The question is, why, when it was in that buffer zone, didn't you shoot it out? They did it on the other end. Once it came out of South Carolina and left landfall and then left land and went into the buffer zone on the other end, then they shot it down. But why not at the first setting? He doesn't want to answer that. He says, well, we didn't really know what it was doing or where it was going. Maybe they were thinking it was just going to do a little touch and go. Right? Come in, up. This is American. We're just going to, sort of sweep on by and then go back out in international waters. Maybe they were thinking that, but then it made a course correction onto landfall. And they go, oh, well, now we can't shoot it down because it's going to fall and land on a bunch of poor Alaskans.
Determining where we will take a shot in combat when we're fighting people who are fighting against us. And we work our way to a near zero probability of collateral damage when we take that shot. Although Alaska is in places not as inhabited as other places, it is inhabited. And at that time, we didn't understand through the modeling, if we shot that, what it would do on the ground. Ultimately, it came back to maybe a 20 mile by 20 mile piece of ground. And without being able to clear that, we wouldn't do that in combat, sir. And I think in this case, we certainly didn't want to take that chance with Alaskans or any other Americans.
Wow, that's pretty
throughout
scary.
The flight path.
That's pretty scary. Wow. So 20 mile by 20 miles, square miles, a lot of potential land down there, certainly. But we wouldn't even do that in combat. So I guess that means, like, if the Chinese, if you can just get some like high altitude balloons, a bunch of them, to come into the United States, they really, the military, even in combat, doesn't want to shoot them down. Is kind of what he said, right? So I guess it means it's that much more important to shoot them down before they get into your airspace, so that he has a zero casualty probability or whatever he was talking about. Okay, all right.
So we created a situation now where our adversaries are going to kind of try to figure out what they can and can't fly over our airspace.
Yeah, just big hunks of
maybe a
metal.
balloon. What are they going to try next? UAV, UAS, or I mean, is that where we're at now? They're going to
Slippery slope. Yeah.
I mean, the Russians test our airspace all the time, and you scramble fighters to interdict them because you're saying nothing can fly over our airspace. That's sovereign airspace.
Yeah,
so
nothing.
Now we're in a new day where our adversaries get to try to figure out what you're going to let fly over and what you're not.
Great question.
No, sir, I think, and kind of back to Senator Tester's earlier comment, I would say, first of all, we are certainly grateful for the support from this committee and for your trust, sir. I would tell you,
I don't think they do trust you. That's why they're lecturing you right now. All of these people from all of these border states. You've got Montana right there, Maine right there, Alaska is Murkowski. We've got North Dakota over here. They're all pissed.
that throughout this, General Van Erck and the men and women who were serving under him had American safety in mind throughout. And at any moment, had it presented some sort of intent to hurt Americans, they would have taken that balloon out of the sky. It would have happened. I would tell you that is the same should something else happen. General Van Erck, the rest of the military stands ready, whatever threats come. But we do expect that they will assess and report. And in this case, sir, he assessed and reported based on the intent and based on where it was at the time.
So there's some things they can fly over or near Hawaii. There's some things they can fly over Alaska, but maybe not over California or possibly over Montana or North Dakota. It's just kind of, you decide based on the circumstance.
Yeah, kind of a stupid policy, right? Because then they can just kind of do whatever they want, and there's a lot of ambiguity there, and things get lost in the mess. That's part of the problem. That's why a nice, clear, unequivocal policy is very useful. You just say, no, I mean, it's our line. If you step 1 inch over our line, you get shot down. I mean, there's no story about that, right? There's no question. It's like if your mother says, if you're home 1 minute after 9 o'clock, you're in big trouble. You know what that meant. You said, all right, you're there most of the time, else you're grounded. I think that was I'm not speaking from experience, of course.
Doesn't that create a situation where our adversaries are going to test what you think can and can't fly over different or proximity to different parts of the country on a regular basis?
Senator.
And is that good? How are you going to prevent that kind of thing from now being tested, even more than you already are? And you're going to be are you going to start making subjective decisions about different types of aircraft and what proximity and where they can fly, what states they can and can't fly over, or Guam, or, pick a spot. This is where it seems to me we're getting into a dangerous place in terms of how this was handled.
And do you guys even know what your policies are? I mean, it sounds like you just assess and report. Like, wouldn't the general just say, yeah, no, it's right. If it crosses our line, it gets shot down. But they also can't admit that now, right? They can't come out and say, yes, Senator, yeah, you're right. Next time this happens, we'll shoot it down, because then they would be admitting a mistake on this one.
Senator, if I may, this flight was different than all the rest, and that's why we took the action that we did. To the question of building upon General...
That doesn't sound good. It means that the default is to allow the Chinese to fly spy balloons over us, right? Default, I think most people would agree, especially if there's nobody on board one of these things, right? If it's a airliner full of 300 civilians, you might, have a question before you blow it out of the sky. But this is a totally unmanned spy balloon. They knew what it was. Why would they even why wouldn't the default be automatically just, you're gone?
Sims notes about why we didn't take it down over Alaska. A key piece of this is the recovery. For us to be able to exploit and understand this balloon and its
give me a
capabilities
break.
fully. If we had taken it down over the state of Alaska, which is part of the United States,
or in the waters, in the Alaskan waters,
it would have been a very different recovery operation. As Senator Murkowski knows,
they didn't want cold water. They liked the oceans in South Carolina better. Yeah, a little better beach time out there.
Water depths offshore, the Aleutians, at
They're
6
cold.
plus nautical miles go very quickly from about 150 feet to over 18,000 feet near the Bering Sea. The winter water temperatures in the Bering Sea hover consistently in the low 30s,
Too
which
cold.
would make recovery and salvage operations
What a
very
joke.
dangerous. Additionally, the northern portion of the Bering Sea has ice cover,
It's
which
cold
can be
water,
extremely
man.
dangerous, which would induce additional risk. So again, a key part of the
It's
calculus
cold.
for
It's
this
cold.
operation
The water's
was
cold.
the ability to salvage, understand, and exploit the capabilities of the high-altitude balloon, and we look forward to sharing that with you in a classified session and also openly as we learn more.
Wow, yeah, it's cold water out there, boys. You don't want to get in there. You know what happens when you get in very cold water. And she's saying, we're just thinking about our recovery efforts, and we spied on them. We spied on them harder than they spied on us. You're welcome, America.
Just the chairman, just finishing up here. Those are the kind of things I think are important. People want to understand that. People support our men and women in uniform. We appreciate what you do. We owe you our lives, and we are deeply thankful for that. But Americans don't understand this situation, and so they need to understand why the decisions were made that were made, and whether or not that is what is best for national security. And just the final quick question is, could that balloon not be forced down some way other than shooting it down? Obviously, we have aircraft that can exceed that altitude. And so just a final question, couldn't that have been forced down some way rather than shooting it down, which would have, in a lot of ways, been better? You avoid the risk to people on the ground and you get it intact.
Yes, sir. Sir, and we'll talk in the next session, I believe, about some thoughts. We didn't have the ability to capture the balloon or bring the balloon down with a particular munition that we thought would make it less dangerous. And quite frankly, we didn't know where it would go if we were to somehow impact its flight path at that point.
Yeah, they can't figure it out. So they're, our multi-trillion-dollar defense department that's, built with all sorts of technology to, handle this type of stuff. They can't figure it out, so they just let it mosey on through the whole country before finally shooting it down on the other end. Amazing. So you can see why the senators are upset about it. I think they'll continue to be upset about it because they got no real answers. A lot of weird excuses, kind of like, excuses why your homework's late the next day at school or something. But I don't think the American people are buying it. In fact, I can see many of you are not buying it in the chat in real time. It sounds like a bunch of excuses. So right across the hall, there was another hearing taking place. This was in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and we've got two clips from this one from Rubio, and now Rubio is, this one's kind of a dull to listen to, but Rand Paul's excellent. Now, he is always talking about COVID and origins, where the Chinese are, where they fit into that piece of the puzzle as well. So we'll listen to both of these. Rubio, I wanted to play this one because the answer from, this is in the Foreign Relations Committee, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and they have this woman here who is the Deputy Secretary of State. So I wanted to introduce her. I don't think we've heard from her on this program before, but her name is Wendy Sherman. She is the Deputy Secretary of State. So she's sort of the second in command to Anthony Blinken. That was the guy who was going to go over and meet with the Chinese at that time. But she's giving kind of a State Department answer. We heard that kind of the military response previously, but we want to know what the State Department says about this. What do they think about this? And how does the Biden administration fit China into their worldview? We have different presidents and they have different foreign policy, sort of zoomed out strategies. Rubio is detailing what his vision is of the world, and he's asking the State Department what they think.
Broader, because I think it's important to understand sort of the strategic vision behind our tactics on everything that we do. So if we go back to the late 80s, early 90s, end of the Cold War, and the gamble at the time was, if we created this international economic order led by the U.S. and the West, built on this global commitment to free trade, that this notion of that this trade and commerce would bind nations together via trade, via commerce and international interest and economic interest, that it would lead to more wealth and prosperity, that it would lead to democracy and freedom, basically domestic changes in many countries, and that it would ultimately ensure peace. The famous saying now seems silly, that no two countries with McDonald's in them have ever gone to war. That's obviously no longer the case. But the point being is that was the notion behind it. It was what the then Secretary General or Director General of the WTO called that world without walls, rules-based international order. Others call it globalization. And basically our foreign policy has been built around that. Even though it's an economic theory, it basically is what we have built our foreign policy on. I think it's now fair to say that we admitted China to the World Trade Organization, Russia as well. I think it's now fair to say that while wealth certainly increased, particularly in China through its export-driven economy, massive, historic, unprecedented amount of economic growth in that regard, I don't think we can say either China or Russia are more democratic. In fact, they're more autocratic. I don't think we can say that they're more peaceful. Russia has invaded Ukraine now twice, and the Chinese are conducting live fire drills off the coast of Taiwan.
Yeah, nice job.
So I think it's fair to say that gamble failed.
Yeah, nice job.
And we have now to enter. And I think the president actually hinted at some of that in his speech the other night. And we're now entering a new era. What is that new era? What is our vision now for that world?
It's a good question.
In which not just the global international order and world without walls did not pacify or bind nations, but in fact have now placed us into situations where autocracies, through a joint communique, are openly signaling that we need to reject Western visions of democracy and the like. So before we can talk about what we're going to do, we have to understand what our strategic vision is. What is the strategic vision of this administration on what the new order of the world is?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I am interested in her answer. But you can sort of see these polls now forming, right, as this Russia-Ukraine war continues to escalate. Doesn't seem like that's going away anytime soon. We also know that the Chinese and the Russians and sort of the BRICS country are reconstituting their monetary policies, seemingly challenging the United States dollar. We're seeing a lot of different things happen. So what does the Biden administration plan to do in the face of all of that?
I guess Secretary Sherman.
Senator Rubio, that is...
Can you answer that in 2 minutes and 30
yeah,
seconds?
I was going to say, that's a really profound question that I
It's a
probably
good question,
can't fully answer in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But let me say this. I think we all hoped for that vision. But what changed is that Xi Jinping is not the Xi Jinping of the 1990s that we all thought we knew. He is a man, as the president, as the secretary of defense has said, is the pacing challenge. The only country that wants to change that rules-based order that can successfully do so and are trying to make that happen. It is true that our way of life, our democracy, our belief in our values, in the rules-based international order is being challenged. And we have to meet that challenge. And I believe we can meet that challenge by, as the president discussed in the State of the Union, making sure we invest in our own country, which is why the bipartisan support for the CHIPS Act, for the infrastructure bill, what we're doing in the Inflation Reduction Act, all of the bipartisan efforts that have taken place here in Congress are essential to making sure we can invest in our own country to be able to meet that competitive need. Second, that we align with our partners and allies. When President Biden began his presidency, he said that it was critical to reinvest in those partnerships and alliance, and it is paying off because we are putting forward those values. Look at what's happening in our pushing back against Russia in Ukraine. And finally, we have to
What's happening?
be ready to compete, which is why we have to look at supply chains and make sure we either can produce things here in our own country or we can do it with partners or allies
That I agree with.
ensure we have the resilience and the redundancy we need to meet this challenge.
That I agree
with.
with.
But it is above all else a challenge about our values, and it is why the president really ended his State of the Union speaking about democracy, what it means, how we have to show what that means here at home, and what it means around the world.
Yeah, we don't like your idea of democracy, lady. And we don't like Biden's idea of democracy either. But it's an interesting take. You know, the response to basically the question from Rubio was that they're focusing domestically, which I think is interesting. And I think that is kind of a reality of what is happening around the world. I think you're going to see the United States really pull back, not necessarily out of a strategic desire to do it, but just because out of necessity. There's really, you know, the U.S., All right, is this working now? Are we back in business now? Hold on. I think we might be back. Are we back now? Are we back now? Hey, it worked. Oh, gosh. Ah, yay. All right. It worked. That's great news. All right. It worked. So my Restream driver had the microphone crash, but I did a quick refresh and it didn't lose the stream. So that was a miracle. The tubes were working. It's a miracle. All right. So we have here, let me figure out where. Get our bearing straight on this one. All right. Did we have Rand Paul? Did we play Rand Paul? I lost where we were. I don't think we played Rand Paul, did we? All right. So we're going to play Rand Paul now.
Mr. Chairman, it's estimated that between 5 and 18 million people died from COVID-19 worldwide.
All right, so this is Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he jumps right into COVID. We're talking about the balloon from China, but he doesn't really care about the balloon too much. He wants to know about COVID.
Estimated that between 5 and 18 million people died from COVID-19 worldwide. To a significant number of scientists, the evidence suggests that this originated from a lab leak in Wuhan. Does the State Department fund coronavirus research in China?
Do we fund coronavirus? I don't believe so, but I don't know. I'll double check and we'll get back to you on that, Senator.
The answer is yes.
Oh,
we do.
fact check.
It's been going on for more than a decade, and it's done through a program called PREDICT and then the Global Virome. And why this is important is we had 1 million Americans die, and we really haven't had any discussion of this. No hearings, nothing. People are unaware that they're even funding the research. We found out recently through the House unclassified report that money going from the NIH to American universities to the Academy of Military Medical Sciences Research in China.
Follow the bouncing ball. U.S. taxpayer, American educational institutions, China, Chinese military. That's what the U.S. government is allowing to happen right now.
We are subcontracting money and sending it over, but millions is coming from the State Department. So the idea is this: we will identify all the viruses in the world. We'll be safer because we identified them. But here's the question: are we safer to have some guy or some woman crawling down a cave 10 hours away from Wuhan, coming up with bat guano, coming up with viruses and bringing it to a city of 15 million like Wuhan? This is what's been going on for a decade. It's a setup for an accident. It's a setup for a mistake. And nobody's doing anything about it.
That's all the research, the gain of function research. They go dig up these viruses and then put them in a bunch of petri dishes and try to figure out how it's going to evolve so they can counteract it. But the State Department doesn't even know they're funding it. Are you funding it? She says, no, I don't think so. I don't know. No, I'm not sure as far as I know. He said, you are. Hello. They don't even know where the money's going and how it's being used.
Continue to fund it. The main group that's been getting this money is EcoHealth Alliance, over $100 million, a lot of it through the State Department. They continue to get money. They don't file their reports on time. They didn't stop their experiments, and yet we reward them with more money. 15 million people died, and we haven't done a thing about it. Nobody seems to care. We're not even sure we fund it.
They don't even know. It's just like an afterthought. I think we wrote that on a sticky note somewhere. I'll have to check back in my office. I've got sticky notes all over my screens.
The department's a big funder of this project. It's a multi-decade long project, but there are scientists, as we speak, from Stanford, from MIT, from prestigious universities around the country. These are not partisans. Most of them are not Republicans who stand up and say, oh my God, what are we doing? Bringing these viruses from remote bat caves to major metropolitan areas and with no controls over this. So we've been asking for information from the State Department because we want to know more about this. U.S. Right to Know has been sending FOIA requests for 2.5 years, and they don't get anything. So, Mr. Chairman, I've sent 2 letters.
2 letters, and they don't respond to any of them.
So, Mr. Chairman, I've sent 2 letters. Bipartisanship. Could we not get bipartisan support for records? This is not partisan. We want to know what the U.S. State Department is funding. NIH resists our requests on their funds.
Nobody
two
answers.
things that we know for certain that have led us to believe this came from the lab that are big came because one was leaked, and this was a DARPA request. So the Chinese researchers in China wanted from DARPA money to create a virus that, guess what, looks exactly like COVID-19.
Wow.
They asked for it in 2018. We turned them down. Fortunately, we did the right thing for once. We
Didn't
turned
give them a
down.
bunch of money.
That doesn't mean they didn't do the research. And so many scientists had an aha moment. They saw this and they said, oh my goodness, they asked for money to create something that looks almost exactly what we got. So in nature, you do not have coronaviruses that infect people that have what is called a furin cleavage site. Chinese said, give us money, we were going to stick a furin cleavage site to allow it to infect humans more. We found out that not because you let us know, or not because the NIH let us know, they still resist.
Nobody
This is
tells
top
us.
secret. This is classified. This is a whole problem of classification, but it's also to cover up things. So we don't know anything about the 28 thing, but we had an illegal leak that went to somebody in the media that's now public that said the Chinese wanted to create a virus just like COVID-19 in 2018. The other thing we
Very
know
convenient.
is 3 researchers in the Wuhan lab, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, got very sick with flu-like symptoms similar to COVID in November. We only know that, though, because the Trump administration on the way out declassified it. So we have to get over all the classification. We also have to be more forthcoming. And I'm hoping the chairman will consider looking at our requests. These are not partisan. We want to know all the information about funding of research in China. We want to know the interactions. There were cables going back and forth between the State Department saying, holy cow, they're not wearing gloves, they don't wear masks and doing this research. They're doing it in what's called a BSL-2 as opposed to a BSL-4. Most of the research that we think escaped was not done in the appropriate lab.
Right.
And the State Department knew about it, but we've had no hearings about this.
Nobody cares.
They refused to give us information. 15 million people died, 1 million Americans died, and you won't give us information.
They don't even know if they fund it. It's not even on their radar. They're just focused on other things like equity and diversity and inclusion.
So what I would ask is look at our request. This isn't partisan. This should be about discovering the origins of this. The scientific community is about 50-50 now, and I would hope that we suspect the Chinese of not being honest and withholding information, but it's sad that the U.S. government is withholding information from its representatives.
Yeah, you know that the Chinese are going to be opposed to your interests and be enemies of American interests and American liberty, but you don't expect your own government to also be colluding in on that as well. So Rand Paul's calling them out on it, rightfully so. They should tell us all about that and we should get to the bottom of it so this never happens again, and everybody who's responsible for wrecking the planet over the last several years is held accountable. So we'll continue, of course, to cover the senators as they blast China and continue to demand answers. But now let's turn our attention over to the White House and see what they have to say about this. Of course, we have China responding. China ignoring the Biden administration. They did not like that State of the Union speech that he gave the other night. They say that it was highly irresponsible for him to say what he said about President Xi over there. We'll listen to that clip, but China's also just not responding on this balloon saga either. That got blown out of the sky. We're going to see what Lloyd Austin says about it, and we'll also hear from Hakeem Jeffries about what is going on with China. But before we understand China's reaction, let's hear what the president said during his speech, because he called out President Xi by name. He said it like this during the State of the Union.
Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying. Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one.
Putin. I bet Putin would do it.
America's rallying.
I think Putin would probably do it. I think there's a lot of them that would do it. Anybody who wants total control, lifelong power, no real threats to your unlimited control, dictator for life, you run the whole country with an iron fist. I think there's probably a bunch of them that would like to go over there. And I can remember one person in the United States who was singing the praises of the Chinese government very loudly, and his name was Dr. Fauci. Remember all his statements? Well, they have some advantages that we don't have. They can do certain things that we can't do. In fact, what China did was very, very praised by Fauci. They were able to lock people down even harder and mandate even harder than we were able to here. But that was the president. Name me one, as he usually does out there screaming. I don't even know if he knows what he's talking about. But Bloomberg's reporting that the Chinese did not take kindly to that, says that China blasts Biden for his highly irresponsible remarks on Xi, which means, it just feels like we're just sort of careening off the road into World War III. But Beijing lashed out at President Joe Biden for saying that the Chinese leader faces enormous problems, underscoring the renewed tensions between the two nations since the U.S. downing of the balloon. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, her name is Mao Ning, said on Thursday at a regular press briefing, said the following: "The U.S. remarks are highly irresponsible and they violate basic diplomatic protocols," is what they said. "We are firmly opposed to that and we condemn that." They're condemning us back? We just condemned them. The U.S. House of Representatives just condemned them, and now they're condemning us back? Oh, great. Mao said in a response to a question, the Ministry of Defense said separately on Thursday that it declined to engage in talks with the United States over balloons because the use of force violates international practice and sets a bad precedent. The Chinese are unhappy that we blew up their spy balloon. They said the U.S. hasn't created a proper atmosphere for dialogue, calling it irresponsible that you blew up our civilian balloon. The Pentagon earlier said that China rebuffed U.S. efforts to arrange a call between the two countries. In an interview on Wednesday, he said that the man in China, President Biden said the man Xi has enormous problems, said he has great potential and an economy that's not functioning very well. Everybody assumed China would be all in with Russia, but they're not all in it. Biden said relationships haven't soured too badly. We'll see how that goes. But okay, so that's what the Chinese are doing. They're unhappy with Biden. We also know they're not responding to phone calls. We saw this from the New York Times. They say China isn't ready to pick up the phone after the balloon incident. Chinese officials rejected a request from the U.S. Defense Secretary to speak with his counterpart after an American jet fighter took it down. On Tuesday, China had rejected a request from the guy that we're going to listen to, the double face mask, face shielded Secretary of Defense called Lloyd Austin. He called, they said, we don't really want to talk to you. Debris fell. Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, the press secretary for the Pentagon, he responded. He said, "We believe in the importance of maintaining open lines of communication. Lines between our militaries are particularly important at moments like this. Unfortunately," he said, "the PRC has declined our request to arrange a call with the Chinese defense minister." So the U.S. gets embarrassed, shoots down a spy balloon. Then they call the Chinese. And they say, "Are you ready to talk to us?" General Ryder said the Pentagon would keep trying. Blinken canceled the trip. China has insisted it was simply a weather balloon. But our military says no, not at all. Not the first time China's refused to take a call from the Pentagon. So they're a little bit fiery there. Beijing fired back. State-run Global Times said that China had reached out to Mr. Austin after he took office. So they're just laughing at us. They're probably literally running around with balloons all over the place in China. But we also have Lloyd Austin. He, of course, sat down with CBS to explain his take on the balloon story. This is what it sounded like. This was the first sit-down from Mr. Austin.
Shoot-down happened on live TV. Now, thanks to an amateur radio scanner, we know what the pilots were saying to each other.
That is a big kill. The balloon is completely destroyed.
This is what appears to be metal chaff cloud, so I definitely see metal breaking apart.
Immediately after the shoot-down, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin tried to call his Chinese counterpart to explain.
I put in a request for a call, and they did not accept that request.
Speaking publicly for the first time about the Chinese balloon, Austin told CBS News his biggest worry was it would spy on U.S. nuclear forces located at bases across the country.
All of our strategic assets, we made sure that we were buttoned down and movement was limited so that we didn't expose any capability unnecessarily.
Yeah, so they didn't transfer things between different bases while they were overhead. Why? Because they could see.
A strategic asset, you mean the nuclear force?
Yeah.
It was part of a
nuclear
fleet
force.
of spy balloons based on the island of Hainan, which have been flying over the U.S. at least since 2019, when one circumnavigated the globe.
There were 3 incidents a couple of years ago that balloons overflew parts of the U.S.
That every single person in the Trump administration did not know about. Milley, no, I don't know if Milley said anything on the record. Mattis did. We had Esper did. We had Pompeo came out. We had Ratcliffe, who all came out. They said, we don't know anything about these balloons.
Which parts?
There were parts of Texas and Florida that the balloon flew over.
In February of last year, a balloon was spotted over the Hawaiian Islands, and jet fighters scrambled to inspect it. Last week, this balloon was spotted over Costa Rica. Turns out Chinese balloons have been violating airspace all over the world, much of the time without anyone noticing.
Take them out.
Until last week, when everybody noticed.
All right. So that's our Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and we also will see what else they have in store for us. Congress is going to be getting classified briefings. We'll see if they have any new developments. Our final clip is from Hakeem Jeffries. This is the newest leader of the Democrats, the minority party. He gave a press briefing today. He got asked about the Chinese balloon. Here's what he said.
Thanks. There was a briefing on the Chinese spy flight this morning for House members, and some House Republicans are accusing President Biden of not spending enough time on China during his State of the Union speech. I was wondering, do you think the president should have addressed the issue more on Tuesday?
I think the president has been incredibly strong as it relates to the strategic competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay.
President Biden took decisive action.
Not really.
That both resulted in making sure that that surveillance balloon was downed,
after
but was taken down in a way that didn't jeopardize the safety and well-being of the American people, and also allowed for the United States to recover the remains of the surveillance balloon in a manner that will yield significant intelligence benefits for our country.
That same talking point, we're spying on them, so don't worry about it. We got actually more done since they sent their spy balloon over to us now. Well, we'll continue to cover this, of course. We'll see what else China has in store. I'm sure they'll react. We'll see if World War III continues to percolate. Of course, we appreciate you subscribing wherever it is you're watching this. Thank you for liking this video, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends. Well, that was it for us on the day. We covered some good ground. A lot of balloon and foreign stuff. Well, tomorrow we'll probably spend time on the judiciary and the oversight committees. But you can see we covered the Senate, the border states up in the north, very unhappy about the balloon flying overhead. We also had the House condemning officially China. We'll see if anything else gets stacked on top of the House resolution. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you and to see what you have to say. I saw some very generous, very kind super chats come in from our friends on YouTube. And I see our friends over on Rumble. Shout out to Larry One, Donut Mind Me. We got Crown Royals in the house. Jan X over there. Larry One, Sedona Rocks. Army Brat. Odessia's over there. Good to see you, Army Brat. And let's see what's coming in over on YouTube. Here we had a couple get the show started. Our first one was from Chris. Yeah, and so Chris, great question. We were able to work that one into the show. I appreciate that. What fool would vote nay to condemn a spy balloon? Was voting on this really necessary? What's the point? Seems more like kabuki dance. Yeah, well, that's basically what Congress is. I mean, if they didn't sit around and shuffle papers and just talk, what would we have? Oh yeah, we'd have a functional government. Oh yeah. Good call, Chris. Good to see you. Z says, the Texas bill is to ban Chinese companies and citizens from buying property, not all Chinese Americans. Many countries require citizenship to buy land. Okay, so it's to ban Chinese companies and Chinese citizens, not all Chinese Americans. Yeah, so it's something, there's additional context to the bill that our friend Sheila Jackson Lee conveniently left out for us. Thanks for the clarity on that one, Z. We also have Ray K's in the house. Said, imagine the sanctions that would have been imposed if the Russians did it. Can the Russians be sanctioned any harder? Is there more to sanction them on? I mean, I think they pretty much have been sanctioned up the wazoo at this point. Not sure what else there is to sanction them on. But Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The Chinese just have free range. I mean, if it was anybody else, you'd think it would be a bigger problem. Oh, hey, Fred's here. His rascally dog is in the house. Says Rob, Johnny's puppy, dragged in a large helium tank and 3 huge balloons today. Oh, gosh. In his cell contacts, I found somebody named Xi Jinping. Says, I need a new dog, exclamation point. Yeah, your dog is out of control over there, Fred. He's getting in on the balloon grift, though. I mean, it's a good grift if you can do it. I don't have the technical capabilities to do it, but I didn't realize that you could just fly balloons around this country wherever you want, really, before they get blown out of the sky when you're done. So I was very curious. Like, I would like to fly. I would ask your puppy if he'd fly over Area 51. I want to know really what's going on over there. You know, the Chinese flew towards Middle America, but they skipped over Area 51 in Nevada. And so that's kind of where I would go, you know, to see. So tell your puppy, your dog Johnny, to swing over by my place. I'll hop in there with him. We'll go around for a ride. Newbie of Death is here. Says if it was a commercial airliner full of civilians not obeying radio diversion, they would have shot it down immediately wherever it was, though. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there was a story about the Russians doing that, right? The Russians shot a plane down, or it was an accident or something, and everybody was pointing fingers at that. But certainly, if it was a spy plane, they would have shot it down. I think that is certainly true. Or I don't. Maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe they wouldn't have. Who knows? I'll just take pictures. They can't see anything, anyways. Ray K says, in my humble opinion, this is insane. With the super chat of 1984, perfectly appropriate. Says all this time spent on a balloon that should have been shot down right away. What are they planning, or what are they covering up, or are they really this incompetent? It's a good question. I don't know, right? It could be a shiny object. It could be to deviate us from talking about Hunter Biden or Joe Biden, or from the Republicans hammering home on oversight, right? There's a lot of reasons that this could be out floating around in the military. It's like, no, you know, it's plausible deniability. They can say this was just a justification. This was justified for a bunch of reasons. Water's cold. We're spying on them, right? All of the things we've heard. They could really be this incompetent. I think that's also probably true. Could be both. Or we are careening literally into World War III. This is just a second front that's opening up. The Chinese wanted to start it. They need some justification to escalate tension so that they can conduct their invasion of Taiwan. This is the pretext. Who knows? Scary, actually. We got Frou Featherstone is in the house. Welcome to the super chat board there, Frou. Thanks for your support on here. Says this much manure is a danger of spontaneous combustion. Do we still believe that the Pentagon is on our side? No, not really. I think the Pentagon is on the side of the Pentagon, if I can be honest about that. I don't think that they're on the side of America. I think it's, you know, some segments of America, but I think that there's a lot of anti-American elements in the Pentagon. I think we're watching it. Just Cause is here, says, no audio, brother. CCP got you. They may have, man. So I think it was my audio driver. So I use Restream as a multi-streaming platform. That's what allows us to be on Rumble and YouTube and on Twitter and elsewhere. And it gave me an error. And normally when I refresh it, it ends the stream, but I refreshed it and it kept the stream going. And so we got to keep it going. But all right, awesome. Thank you, Just Cause, for that. And I'm glad we were able to get the show back on track here when we had that little technical rub. Sometimes that doesn't always happen, I know. We also had Jonah. Thank you, Jonah, for sending this one in. Says it was not a surveillance balloon. It was a surveying balloon on behalf of CEFC and Hudson West. Those are the Hunter companies, right? The CEFC, I think, was something that you'll find in the Hunter Biden laptop files. And I was thinking maybe do they have like beam up capabilities? Maybe they were flying over Joe Biden's residence and beaming up the classified documents. Who knows what they were doing? But certainly not good. And the fact that they're trying to come out here and tell us this was all, I know, it's perfect. No, we spied on them. Don't worry about it. We got tons of information. All's good. I don't buy it. All right, so let's go over to our friends on Twitter for a quick moment and say hello to everybody before we go over to our locals after party. Paul Mino, our friend at Sleepy Dog Lee, one of our meme smiths on the program, is in there. He says, Rob, please remind people that the after party tomorrow is not for the meek or mild. Bring your popcorn. Fridays are a little bit extra spicy on our show. You can see we have Pepe running across the super green field of greens, super hairdo food contraption here. It's the bursting energy when you drink your Field of Greens. James Pepper is here, says the U.S. Navy has a submarine designed to recover nuclear weapons that fell into the oceans. Woods Holes has one that can be loaded onto a transport plane. They use it to monitor nuclear waste off San Francisco. Yeah, so they could have gone up and actually taken out the balloon up in Alaska and retrieved it at the bottom of the ocean there. Donna's here sharing this tweet from Clandestine, which is a very fun account to follow, telling us about Pete Buttigieg. So thank you, Donna, for sharing those. Oh my gosh, Donna is celebrating that we had 19 viewers on Twitter. Absolutely outstanding. You can see my face right there. I don't even realize what's happening, but out of control. We have that there. Thank you for capturing that. 19 people. Woo, amazing. Sheila says, Robert, I love your shows, but I must confess I'm a mail carrier from Michigan. Shout out to our mail carriers from Michigan. Says, I listen to you every day, Tuesday through Thursday, Saturday, while delivering the mail. I truly enjoy your show. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Sending love from Michigan. Sheila, thank you for saying that. Thank you so much for sending that message. I really do appreciate that because I used to do the same thing. I wasn't delivering mail. I was cleaning pools is what I was doing. I was going from house to house cleaning pools. And I was regularly listening to shows. I was listening to people, podcasts. I listened to a lot of talk radio. And so I know the relationship that you develop. And so I'm grateful that you're listening and I'm grateful that you're here and a part of the show. And thank you for being good at what you do and delivering the mail in Michigan. Shout out to everybody in Michigan. All right. And so that's awesome. We also had a couple from Danny McWilliams told us no sound. We had another one from Adam sharing Eat Your Greens. Adam says, we can still hear you. Omnipotent is in the house. TJ is giving, I don't endorse this. Okay. But just so you know what's going on, I don't endorse that. But you know, it's Lisa Murkowski and she's of course a lot of fun. So, all right. And so those are our friends over on Twitter. Go and follow your fellow watchers. Go and follow and support our Elon free speech platforms, whether it's on Rumble or whether it's on Locals or whether it's on Twitter. We're grateful for everybody who is following us along over there. All right. Now, we are going over to Locals for our after party, and I hope you can join us. The web address to join us there, of course, is the usual, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We're heading over there right now. And so come and join us. But before we get out of here, thank you to our sponsors of this show. Of course, if you need some excellent, healthy, real organic superfood, your daily servings of fruits and vegetables every day, go to fieldofgreens.com. Use code Robert to save 15% off your order. You can get all sorts of different products. There's really a lot of good stuff there. I've tried several of them, and I recommend them. They are good. So you'll feel energy bursting with green health, and it's just going to be outstanding. Also, our law firm, the R&R Law Group, located at 480-787-0394. Also online at rrlawaz.com. Going to be a busy weekend here in Arizona. So everybody stay safe if you're out here. If you do get a little, in trouble with the law, you may not have even done anything illegal, okay? There are saturation patrols all over the place. Our law firm can help. 480-787-0394. We also want to thank the mods of the show, our friend Vientikis Prime. We've got K Bean. Of course, we got Just Cows in the house. Our friend Lean playing hooky. Shout outs to Ronnie Cole, our friend Zulu, and Geomancy Games, of course, is also on YouTube. We have our meme smiths in the house who meme up the show for us. We've got Sleepy Dog Lee. Give him a follow on Twitter. And of course, our friend Geegum, who is on Locals, who are memeing up the place for us, which we're very appreciative of. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. I hope you can join us there, but if not, then I look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.